Well, howdy, folks. I'm Eric. Welcome to the channel. Today, we are going to be talking about MLB expansion and realignment. So, Sunday Night Baseball this week, Rob Manfred kind of dropped a bombshell on the MLB fandom. He decided to talk openly about MLB expansion and realignment. This is what he had to say. He said, I think if we expand, it provides us with an opportunity to geographically realign. I think we can save a lot of wear and tear on our players in terms of travel, and I think our postseason format would be even more appealing for entities like ESPN, because you would be playing out of the East, out of the West. That 10 o'clock time slot where we sometimes get Boston, Anaheim would be two West Coast teams, and that 10 o'clock slot that's a problem for us sometimes becomes a real opportunity for our West Coast audience. So obviously this is huge news. I mean, MLB expansion has been something that's been on the table now for quite a while. With the new CBA coming up, it might be a part of that. And there's many cities that are asking to have a Major League Baseball team right now. There's also uncertainty with teams like the A's and the Rays, like what's going to happen with those organizations. But it's really a big news for the commissioner to come out and talk about this so openly. It is something that's really lit the internet on fire. A lot of baseball fans have a lot of opinions about that. And me, as a baseball fan, I also have an opinion about it. And that's what I want to share with you today. Sometimes when I have an opinion, I make a PowerPoint presentation and I create a YouTube video. So I wanted to do the thought experiment today of putting together a new Major League Baseball, adding a couple of teams, realigning the whole league, the playoff structure, and really figuring out what this new Major League Baseball might look like. I want to set some ground rules here. Being a lifelong baseball fan, the first thing here, I want to preserve the legacy of baseball. Baseball is America's oldest professional sport, and it has a long history in our country. And so I really want to preserve that. I think the American League and the National League in name are very important. The World Series has pretty much always been played between the American League and the National League, so I want to keep that there. The way I'm solving for that in this scenario is I'm basically creating the American League as the Eastern teams and the National League as the Western teams. So the World Series will still be played between the AL and the NL in this new format. I really want to prioritize geography. I want to look at crosstown rivalries. I want to look at regional rivalries. I want teams to be able to drive to a rival city. So these are all really important. And also, as Rob Manfred mentioned, I want common time zones so that we're seeing a lot of games being played in the same time zone with fan bases who are in the same time zone. And then finally, I really want to protect iconic rivalries. The big three for me are the Yankees and Red Sox, the Cubs and the Cardinals, and the Dodgers and the Giants. I think that these are the three most historic, storied rivalries in Major League Baseball, so we want to make sure that these are preserved along with other rivalries throughout the league. All right, so now we get to expansion teams. So expansion teams, this is a subject that a lot of people have a lot of opinions on. There are a lot of worthy cities out there to receive a Major League Baseball team. But for this experiment, I will be expanding the league to the two cities of Nashville and Salt Lake City. This gives us one team in the East, one team in the West. Nashville has been bidding to be a Major League Baseball city for quite some time. There is an ownership group in place with a stadium plan in place in that city. I think it makes a lot of sense to put another team in the South. There isn't really a team between like Kansas City and St. Louis and Atlanta. So putting a team somewhere there in the South can serve Mississippi, Alabama, Kentucky. I think there's a lot of options here that Nashville could service. And then Salt Lake City, similar. I think that there is a bit of a desert between what will become the Las Vegas A's and the Colorado Rockies. There's a integrated fan base there in Salt Lake City. They just got an NHL team. They are adding sports to their city, and they're not going to be poaching from other cities. I've heard proposals for Portland, which would poach from the Mariners fan base. I've heard proposals for Vancouver, which would poach actually from the Blue Jays fan base. Being a Mariners fan, I know what it's like when the Blue Jays come to town and all of those Blue Jays fans from Vancouver come down to see their team play. But Salt Lake City wouldn't really be poaching from any other city. So I think that it's a really, really good option for Major League Baseball. Also, ownership group in place and stadium plan in place already in Salt Lake City. So let's take a look at this. If we add Nashville and we add Salt Lake City, what will it look like if we divide it up into 4-team divisions? I'm a big fan of a 4-team division because I'm a Mariners fan. I remember the old AL West before the Astros joined. I like a 4-team division. I think it's really tight. It keeps those division rivalries really fresh. I think it looks really good in the NFL, and I think it's a model that could work really well for a 32-team Major League Baseball. So if we're going to split this up into 4-team divisions, and we're going to be following those ground rules that we had before, this is what I think those divisions should look like. First up, we have the Great Lakes Division. So this will be Toronto, Detroit, Cleveland, and Milwaukee. All of these teams happen to be geographically located on a Great Lake. They're also relatively close to one another, and I think that we create a really nice little rivalry here up in the northern part of the country. If we look at the average distance between divisional opponents, you'll see there's a major decrease for all but one of these teams. 276 miles less distance between divisional opponents for the Blue Jays, 195 for the Tigers, 227 for the Guardians, and the Brewers do see a marginal increase of 46 miles, but it's offset by the reduction for the rest of the teams. The next division that I want to bring up is probably the spiciest division in this new Major League Baseball, and that would be the Metro Division. The Metro Division is the Yankees, the Red Sox, the Mets, and the Phillies. I cannot imagine what these fan bases will do to each other, but having these 4 teams in a division together will be extremely, extremely spicy. You have a crosstown rivalry with the Yankees and the Mets. You have the historic rivalry with the Red Sox and the Yankees, and then you're bringing in Philadelphia, probably one of the most fanatic fan bases in all of American sports, and you're bringing them into a division with these other teams. I think it's going to be nuts. I'm really excited. And as we see, there's a massive reduction in travel for these teams. So 340 miles for the Yankees, 327 for the Red Sox, 440 for the Mets, because they're not traveling to South Florida anymore to play in the division, and 328 for the Phillies. So we're seeing massive travel reduction for these teams, and this is also the tightest division in this new Major League Baseball. Up next in the American League, which is our Eastern teams, we have the Riverside Division. So the Riverside Division is the Reds, the Pirates, the Nationals, and the Orioles. All of these teams have prominent rivers next to their infrastructure, and they're also historically tied on the National Road. You can look that up. So I love this division. I think it's got great historic teams together. It's pulling in that Chesapeake Bay rivalry between the Orioles and the Nationals. And then it preserves an NL Central rivalry with the Pirates and the Reds. These are all very, very historic franchises outside of the Nationals. And I think it's great to keep them together. Once again, massive travel savings for most of these teams. 200 plus miles for the Pirates, the Orioles, and the Nationals. We do see a 76-mile increase for the Reds, but they're kind of biting the bullet for the rest of the league, and we'll get to that in a second. And then finally, the last division in this new American League is the Southland Division. So here we have the Braves, we have the new Nashville team, we have the Marlins, and we have the Rays. Also seeing substantial savings here in terms of travel between divisional opponents. 225 miles average for the Braves, 368 for the Marlins, and 629 miles saved for the Rays. This is huge because they don't have to travel to Canada anymore to play in the division. They're going to stay in the South. This really establishes the southeast corner of the country for baseball, and I think it's great to create this hotbed of baseball there in the hot South. All right, so that's the American League. Those are all of our Eastern teams. Now we're going to move over to the National League, which is the teams in the West, and we're going to start with the Heartland Division. So this is the Cubs, the Cardinals, the White Sox, and the Twins. We're preserving that Cubs and Cardinals rivalry that we all love. And then we're also bringing in a crosstown rivalry with the Sox and the Cubs. And then preserving that AL Central rivalry between the White Sox and the Twins. So really strong contender here. Not as much savings because the NL Central and the AL Central as they exist today already are pretty close to each other. But we're still seeing a savings. Nobody here is traveling more. Everyone is traveling less. Up next in the American League, we have the Great Plains Division. So this is the Rangers, the Astros, the Rockies, and the Royals. And here we're going to see massive savings because the Rangers and the Astros will no longer have to travel to the Pacific Northwest to play in their division. We're going to see almost 700 miles saved for the Rangers and the Astros, which is just phenomenal. The Rockies are going to see a reduction in travel as well. And the Royals, they're really just kind of staying even. They're staying flat at a plus 13, but they are helping the rest of the league immensely especially teams in their division, travel a lot less. Up next, we have what I think is one of the most fun divisions in this new major league, and that is the Mesa division. So this is the San Diego Padres, the Arizona Diamondbacks, the Las Vegas A's, and our new Salt Lake City team. This really carves out a fun little enclave of baseball in the American Southwest. I think it's going to be a really fun division to watch. These are all very dynamic teams in dynamic cities, and they're all really close to each other. If we see here, there's not much of a reduction for San Diego because they're trading Colorado for Salt Lake City. But you see the A's here, they're no longer traveling to Seattle and they're no longer traveling to Houston. So they're saving 551 average miles between divisional opponents, which is pretty great. And everybody's seeing a savings here with the Diamondbacks bringing in at 121. And then that brings us to our final division, which is the Pacific Coast Division. This is adopting its name from the historic Pacific Coast League, and it's bringing in the Mariners, the Dodgers, the Angels, and the Giants. So this is basically running up and down the West Coast. And once again, we're going to be seeing a massive travel reduction, particularly for the Mariners and the Angels, who will be saving 432 and 518 miles respectively, no longer having to travel all the way to Texas to play within their division. Giants are seeing a reduction in 137 miles because traveling north to Seattle is easier than traveling east to Colorado. And then we have the LA Dodgers, who are going to see a 32-mile increase because they will have to travel up to Seattle. But they are preserving their rivalry with the Giants here, and they are establishing an interdivisional crosstown rivalry with the Angels, which I think is just awesome. So let's take a look at these numbers a little bit closer. By the numbers, the biggest winners, the biggest savers of miles for average distance between divisional opponents, the Astros, the Rangers, each getting almost 700 miles, the Rays 629, the Athletics 551, the Angels 518, the Mets 440, and the Mariners 432. These are all teams that kind of exist on the perimeter of the country, and you'll see they are saving a lot of miles by not having to travel to other perimeter cities around the country. All in all, 17 teams save over 200 miles in average distance between divisional opponents, and 22 teams saved over 100 miles. So 22 out of the 32 teams will be traveling at least 100 miles less in this new model. If we look at the closest teams to their divisional opponents, the Yankees and the Mets have the closest average distance to teams within their division, then the Phillies, the Tigers, the Guardians, the Cubs, the White Sox, the Nationals, the Pirates, the Red Sox, and the Orioles. So this is really nicely dispersed amongst our new divisions, and all of these teams are basically within a 3-hour drive on average to teams within their division, which is pretty phenomenal. All in all, we're going to save 7,419 miles of average distance between divisional opponents, which equates to the distance between Chicago, Illinois, and New Delhi, India. This is how much travel we are saving in this new model. There are going to be some losers in this. The Cincinnati Reds, they're going to be traveling 76 miles more. Milwaukee Brewers 46, Dodgers 32, and Kansas City Royals 13. But these are the only 4 teams that see an increase, and it's fairly negligible when you pitch it against the decrease that other teams are seeing. Yeah, the Reds are seeing 76 miles, whereas the Astros are seeing 700 miles. And if we look, these are the teams that will be traveling the most in the new model. The Mariners are still going to travel the most at 872 miles, but they are traveling 432 miles less than they were before. The Rockies at 696 are traveling 103 less. The Astros at 584 are traveling 693 less. The Royals are really our flat team here. They're basically traveling almost exactly the same, which is fine. They're kind of biting the bullet for the rest of the league, so we love you, Royals. Thanks for doing that. Nashville and Salt Lake City are coming in on the higher end, but they're also a little bit more remote, which is why we selected those locations in the first place. And then the Marlins are traveling 542 miles, which is 368 less than they were before. So outside of these 7 teams, every other team in the league, those 25 other teams, they have less than 498 average miles between their divisional opponents. 498 miles, that's about an hour flight. So what that means is that in this new model, most of the teams in the league will be about an hour flight away on average from every other team in their division. So that's a pretty remarkable change from what it was before. But that's if we do it into 4-team divisions. What if we did it into 8-team divisions? There's a lot of chatter online. A lot of people are proposing 8-team divisions. This is the type of thing that we see in hockey with 8-team divisions in a 32-team league. What might that look like? Well, really, I'm just going to put some of these divisions together. So the AL North would look like the Yankees, the Red Sox, the Blue Jays, the Tigers, the Mets, the Phillies, the Guardians, and the Brewers. The AL South would look like the Reds, the Pirates, the Braves, Nashville, the Nationals, the Orioles, the Marlins, and the Rays. Then those would be the AL teams in the eastern part of the country. Now we move over to the National League team in the western part of the country. So we have the Cubs, the Cardinals, the Rangers, the Astros, the White Sox, the Twins, the Rockies, and the Royals. And finally, the NL West division, which would be the Mariners, the Dodgers, the Padres, the Diamondbacks, the Giants, the Angels, the Athletics, and Salt Lake City. So this is what it could look like with those 8-team divisions. There's also a big reason here. This is why I wanted the East to be the American League and the West to be the National League. I think having the Giants, the Dodgers, the Cubs, and the Cardinals in the National League just kind of makes sense. Having the Yankees and the Red Sox in the American League makes sense. So that's where those two nomenclatures come from. So now we've divided up the league into new divisions. So what will the playoffs look like? And this is a major reason why I think this is a great idea, because I think the playoffs are much more interesting in either of these new formats. Let's take a look at what it currently looks like. So right now, the league structure, we have 2 leagues, the AL and the NL. There's 3 divisions per league, the West, the Central, and the East. 5 teams per division. So you get 6 division winners and 6 wild cards for 12 teams total. The top 2 division winners per league get a first round bye, and your odds, all things even, to win your division are 1 in 5, because there's 5 teams in each division, which is 20% chance to win your division. If we look at an 8 division of 4 teams, the NFL does this. So let's look at what they do. They have 2 conferences, the NFC and the AFC. There's 4 divisions per conference, 4 teams per division, 8 division winners, and 6 wild cards to create a 14-team playoff. The top seed in each league gets a first round bye, and all things even, your odds to win your division are 1 in 4, because you're only competing against 3 other teams to win your division, which means on the face of it, you have a 25% chance to win your division, which is a much better chance than the 1 in 5 that we currently have in Major League Baseball. And then let's look at 8 teams. So the NHL does this. The NHL, they have 2 conferences, Western and Eastern. They have 2 divisions per conference, 8 teams per division. The top 3 teams in each division automatically qualify for the playoffs, and then there are 2 wild cards per conference after that. That means 16 teams qualify for the playoffs, half the league. There are no byes, and your odds to auto-qualify for the playoffs are 3 in 8, which is 37.5%. That is much better than the 1 in 5 or 20% that you get in Major League Baseball. Let's dive into that just a little bit more. Right now, in Major League Baseball, there are 6 divisions of 5 teams. Your team has a 1 in 5 chance, on the face of it, to win its division and auto-qualify for the playoffs, which is 20%. In the NFL, they have 8 divisions of 4 teams, and each team has a 1 in 4 chance to auto-qualify by winning its division. That's a 25% chance, which is also a 25% increase over the current MLB odds. And right now in the NHL, there are 4 divisions of 8 teams, and the top 3 teams in each division automatically qualify for the playoffs. That's a 37.5% chance on the face of it, or 3 in 8, to auto-qualify for the playoffs, which is an 87.5% increase over the current MLB odds of 20%. So, if it seems like, you might be rooting for a team that hasn't made the playoffs for a while in Major League Baseball, or maybe has had long playoff droughts. I don't know what that's like as a Mariners fan. It's true. It's really hard to make the playoffs in Major League Baseball, and adopting these new divisional formats would dramatically increase your team's chances of making the playoffs. On the face of it, obviously, the talent on the field has to do what they do, but on the face of it, if all things equal, the odds increase dramatically. So, what's my prediction? What do I think Rob Manfred's going to do? Well, I think the writing's on the wall, and I think I want to go back to his statement to unpack it. He said, I think our postseason format would be even more appealing for entities like ESPN because you'll be playing out of the East, out of the West. That 10 o'clock time slot where we sometimes get Boston, Anaheim would be two West Coast teams. And that 10 o'clock slot, that's a problem for us sometimes, becomes a real opportunity for our West Coast audience. I think that Rob Manfred is telegraphing that they are going to be moving to 8-team divisions. This is something that already works in the NHL, and I think it's something that baseball will adopt. Obviously, we've already unpacked the higher playoff odds on the face of it for teams. Primetime games in every time zone. You have stronger regional and crosstown rivalries driving more engagement, less travel between cities. That means that rivals can travel between cities more easily. More engaged fan bases across the board with higher playoff odds and closer rivalries. And of course, the reason for all of this is increased revenue potential. If you have more engaged fan bases because there are higher playoff odds and there are closer regional rivalries, that engagement will turn into dollars. You'll be able to monetize that, sell more advertising in the stadium, on television, have more viewers. That's what this is all about. That's what Major League Baseball wants. And there is historical precedence for this. Before the expansion era, this is what Major League Baseball looked like in 1960. It was 2 leagues of 8 teams. So basically, you're taking this model, which once existed in Major League Baseball, and you're doubling it to create 4 divisions of 8 teams total. So that's what I think Major League Baseball is going to do. I think they're basically going to follow an NHL-style model. You get more teams in the playoffs, and those playoffs are more regionally distributed throughout the country. But that being said, here's what I think Major League Baseball should do. This is my proposal for what realignment will look like across the league, and it's just a little bit different. So let's take a look. My proposal is that you have your 2 leagues. You have the American League, which are our Eastern teams, and you have the National League, which are our Western teams. Then you have 4 conferences: the AL North, the AL South, the NL Central, and the NL West. And within those conferences, you have 8 divisions. The Metro and the Great Lakes make up the AL North. The Southland and the Riverside make up the AL South. The Heartland and the Great Plains make up the NL Central. And the Pacific Coast and Mesa divisions make up the NL West. So this is what that looks like with all of the time zone highlighted. The AL North has the Metro and the Great Lakes divisions. Every team here is in the Eastern time zone except for the Brewers. The AL South has the Riverside and Southland divisions. Every team here is in the Eastern time zone except for Nashville. The NL Central has the Heartland and Great Plains divisions, and every team here is in the Central time zone except for the Rockies. And then finally, we have the NL West, which is made up of the Pacific Coast and Mesa divisions. Every team here is in the Pacific time zone, even Phoenix because it's the summertime. And the only team that's in the Mountain time zone would be Salt Lake City. And here is why I want to split it up this way. This is for our new playoff structure. So what we want to do here is still preserve that 8-team structure, but we want to adopt more of an NFL-style playoff. So we'll still have the 2 leagues, the AL and the NL. We'll have the 2 conferences per league. We'll have 2 divisions per conference, 4 teams per division, and the playoffs will be made up of 4 division winners and 3 wild cards. So we'll have 14 teams in the playoffs. We won't have 50% of the league in the playoffs. It will still be less than 50% of the league playing in the playoffs. First round bye for best record in the league. All of the division winners get an automatic bid. The next best record in each conference gets a wild card bid, and then the next best record in the league gets the final wild card bid. And all teams are seeded by record. They are not seeded by divisional champion. Here's what that looks like. Here's our new National League. We have our NL West Conference and our NL Central Conference. The NL West is made up of the Pacific Coast and Mesa divisions. The NL Central is made up of the Heartland and Great Plains divisions. Here's what it looks like at the end of the season. We have our 4 division winners, the Mariners, the White Sox, Salt Lake City, and Colorado. So they will get automatic bids to the playoffs. Up next, we look at the next best record in each conference, which will be the Padres and the Royals. And then the last wild card spot will go to the next best record in the entire National League, which would be the LA Dodgers. So these are our 7 teams that will make the playoffs in this scenario. And then they will be seeded this way. The Mariners get a bye. The 4s and 5s play against each other. The 3 and 6 and the 2 and 7. The next round is not a standard bracket, the Mariners and the 1 seed will play the remaining lowest seed, and then the second highest seed will play the second lowest seed. The winners of those 2 matchups will make it to the NLCS, and then the winner of that goes to the World Series. So that's my proposal. Obviously, it is bulletproof. You will all agree with it, I'm sure, and there will be no disagreements. However, if there are any disagreements that comes up, please put them in the comments below. I want to thank everybody for watching this. Please subscribe to this channel for more content like this, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.